So if you look at like developmental models, you'll see that the development of a human usually starts at a very root-based level of just like me, survival of me. You know, you think of a baby. And some people never really grow out of this, and you'll notice that they're kind of like stunted in a way, but then they move into the next stage and the next stage, and slowly they start to realize like other people exist, and maybe you have to take care of other people, and then society exists, and you kind of have to take care of society, and the world exists, right? And then beyond that. And whatever stage of development someone's at will be how complicated they are as a person, how deeply they think on things, and how much they will focus on others and themselves and such. That's not what this video is about, but also you'll notice with children, they're very imaginative, they're very creative, they're very malleable and flexible, because they have to be like this because they need to learn the language, the movements, the customs and such, and the ways of their culture. As a child, you're meant to learn how to live in, your family, and then eventually get a bit older and you have to learn how to live in society, right? And you're more malleable. And this is a lot of mental energy, so positive, young, like yin-yang, young mental energy, which is like an opposite of the development models almost, where the development models you start from the ground, but the kind of creative neuroplasticity thing comes from the sky or from the mind, right? Because what happens is that as someone develops and takes on the culture and figures out what they need to do, they slowly go down into the root. So from the mind, they go to the root where they've learnt their language. They don't need to learn another language, right? Or if they learnt 2 languages, they've learnt their 2 languages. They don't need to learn another one. They probably don't need to learn how to, drive another vehicle, or how to do a different job, or how to, negotiate with different people. Now, in the modern world, if you live in a first world Western country, things are incredibly chaotic, and they're always moving forward and changing just because of the nature of the era that we're in. So you actually do kind of have to learn a lot of things, which contradicts that. But traditionally, you would hit that point. Like if you look at older people, you'll notice they're very stuck in their ways. They work the same job, they do the same thing, they eat the same thing, they talk to the same people. Their world doesn't change. And that's why, you think older boomer generations are very intent on keeping things the way that they are, and, keeping things kind of stuck in that way. And they'll do whatever they can to, whether it costs them money, whether it costs, the future of other people, whatever, just to keep things the same. It's a very, strong instinctual, which you might think like a biological desire. So you can see this duality and this opposite, where when you get older, you develop higher, as in you go from just being all about me and just being all about me and maybe the people around me, to being, society, to understanding greater things, to going beyond society and the world to your mind, and going beyond even your mind into like the greater mind of the world, experiencing some kind of psychedelic union-based consciousness. And of course you have to come back down to reality. So it's like a wave, or a you're riding up and down the levels of consciousness, right? But there's this opposite effect going on, which is more like a biological one. That's more of that is more of they're all biological and mental, whatever, they're both. There's the opposite one, which is the loss of neuroplasticity, which is when you're losing that, creative energy, that yang positive energy, and your energy is becoming, instead of being sweeter when it's young, it's becoming, I don't know, would you say saltier? If we're relating this to taste, more, I don't know, richer or something, like duller but richer, earthlier or something, you'd say. I guess earthly is salty, technically, or I don't know, whatever. You get what I'm saying, right? You become more stuck and more, stagnant, and your focus, instead of the mind, you go to the bowels, so to speak, and the lower areas, right? And that's just like a natural thing that happens. So, why this is all important is that one interesting thing, if we look at spiritual practices, specifically we look at the Chinese like Taoist practices, and mind you, I don't recommend doing any of this stuff, but this is what they do. The yogic, the Taoist stuff. So the idea of the Kundalini being at the root chakra, and they want to send it up to the brain. So basically, this energy, as we age, develop, it goes down and solidifies, stagnates the root, and they want to send it back up. Now, of course, the reason why you don't really want to send it back up is because it destabilizes you, can make you go crazy. The root energy is what leads to finances and stability and success in the physical world and all this stuff, which is why I said you probably don't want to do this stuff, but I'm going to explain what they do, which is that they send it up, as I said. The Taoists, well, all of them pretty much, they will practice not having sex. And what happens when you, and that means sex, by sex I mean masturbation, ejaculation, or actual, between man and woman sex, right? What happens is that you, the genitals kind of seal almost, or they atrophy, and if you do this long enough, it's like when you were a child, right? For men, before we come. For women, it's like, I don't really know. I think they talk about the idea of, I guess before you break the hymen, right? Basically open yourself up. There's like a difference of development, and you kind of go back to a stage almost like that where you don't produce. Oh, actually, no. For women, it would be before. Well, yeah, technically hymen, but also before the period, right? So for men, it's when you can come. That's like when it marks, sexual development. For women, it's the period that marks sexual development, right? So they go to a stage before that by essentially not having any sex, not doing anything there, not stimulating themselves. Again, I don't really recommend this. It's not really healthy to do this, but it's what they do. So women actually stop getting their periods when they do these practices, right? And supposedly, like, if you were maybe a head of a family or something, or a clan or whatever, you would do, and if you're a woman, you would do that, because you would need to have that, mental energy to, I don't really understand. Same if you're a man. So yeah, these parts kind of, the atrophy and all that stuff, and the energy will go up instead of down. So if it's sex as a driving force, the energy really going down because it needs to replenish, it needs to regenerate. When the genitals are stimulated, where are they on the body? They're on the base of the body, essentially. Right, and they do, a lot of the idea of the transmuting of the Jing to the Qi to the Shen, essentially, or the lower Dantian, the lower holder of energies, to the middle holder, around the chest, to the upper of the head, right? They're drawing this energy up to the head. And then eventually they're drawing it back to, what you think the Tao, the nothingness, the nothing and everythingness, which is like a pure energy. So they're transmuting all the shit, the piss, the sexual fluids, the air that you breathe, essentially everything of the body. Again, the lower areas, the bowels and bladders and all this stuff is the lower holders. They're pulling all this, transmuting this up. A lot of the time they don't eat as well. And it will eventually produce, what we think of as an enlightenment, a childlike state enlightenment where they become more, the bones become kind of malleable, and it's like they become an alien, like a description of an alien is the best way. It kind of brings a lot of context and ideas onto aliens now you think about it. So the idea of the hair becoming white, I would assume the skin becomes whiter as well, but yeah, their hair becomes white. They become very, like, the bones become kind of flexible and more supple, as they say, and they become very smooth and soft and like a baby in the womb almost, this idea of that, right? And the Kundalini rising is the exact same thing. They focus more on the idea of the, again, rising of the sexual fluids up to the brain, and your brain becomes more flexible and malleable, and you have a lot of mental energy, and the voice becomes high-pitched. That's also another thing. The body becomes light in weight, and they become kind of physically weak. Again, all these ideas of like the grey alien, this physically weak kind of little skinny pale creature that's like in a spaceship, but they also become hyper intelligent, and the spiritual energy becomes very strong, so they can like, they probably have magical abilities where they can like control things, the elements and telekinetic forces, and I don't know, but I would assume you'd kind of need that to like get by, you'd think, right? But I guess they don't really eat, and they don't sleep, that's another thing. They don't drink. That's once they've reached like the really high level, right? Because they're infertile. So a lot of the time they're also what you would think like or like androgynous, just because it's like the features haven't really, sexual features haven't really developed them, so they've been like an androgynous state. And you can assume like at the top of like maybe a family or a clan or whatever, they might have a person like this, because they would be this like radiator. It's like a Wi-Fi antenna or something. They just radiate like divine energy, and just be this like divine creature essentially. Essentially they're becoming a god-like creature. And I don't really understand what would be beyond that. Maybe they ascend to the stars, or they take on a non-physical body or something. But that's like the process, the legitimate process of like ascension. And that, again, that's becoming incredibly what you would call positively orientated. Lots of positive energy. The opposite is hyper negative, which is like a person that's super physically powerful, sexually, like the genitals would be very pronounced, and they'd have like a very strong sex drive, and be very fertile. A person who's incredibly wealthy and resourceful, and knows how to use resources, and has probably crap loads of cash. Very like stamina is just off the charts. They basically have infinite amounts of stamina. If they farm or do any kind of productive like resource production activities, the vegetables they would make, or the animals they would grow, or the children they would have would be very healthy and prosperous, because it's all this earth energy, or this positive energy which just causes things to grow. They're basically immune to any kind of like physical attack, like they could be shot or cut or stabbed or whatever, and immune to like diseases, all that kind of stuff. They eat a lot, sleep a lot, fuck a lot, very embodied, so to speak. So that's the opposite, very spiritually void. Maybe they don't feel spiritual energies, they're just into the earth. So that's like the spectrum of these two people, and you can kind of think it's like aliens, and then you got like sasquatches, these two positive and negative forces. Now, one interesting thing is that in society, because of all this technology and radiation, what's happening is that, see, electromagnetic radiation, it stimulates us and speeds us up and heats us up and all this stuff, and it makes us turn more to the positive side. I don't know if you've seen someone who's like terminally online, like a super genius of like computer programming, or they're just always on their phone, always on the computer, or so using technology, and they got technology all around them. People are like pale, like a pasty pale white. They've probably got like really long hair, look androgynous, not very physically developed. Maybe they got very long, like skinny looking features. They look like an alien, right? And it's because of all the positive energy. Similarly, more people from the north, like Europe and all that, they kind of got that, like the blonde, blue-eyed people, they got that look to them where they're a little more like that, right? With all that radiation. That's because the computers and electronics and the radiation is making these people technically younger. So they're like old young people, so to speak, old children almost. Sometimes you see that when a person looks. Millennials are the first generation to really be affected. Gen X was kind of affected by this, but millennials are really affected by this, where they're like 30, 40 years old now, and they look like old children almost, like old teenagers, where you can kind of see they never really develop beyond that stage. While the boomer generation in their 20s, they look like 20-year-old, 60-year-olds, right? Like they look like 60-year-olds but in their 20s. So it's this opposite thing where it's funny because the children of the boomer generation, the millennials, so you got these old children coming from these young old people, and it's because the boomer generation are under so much of that negative physical energy, which is why they're so rich and so immune to like disease and pain and everything. And they grow up so quickly, and they're just so, a bunch of houses, very prosperous, very comfortable kind of life. But they're not but the millennials are very intelligent, and they're controlling the technological world. They're making all these websites, and they're all surrounded by technology, and they talk really quickly, and they do things really quickly, and but they don't have houses, and they can't have families, and they're infertile, and they can't get their dicks hard or wet, or they force it to happen, and they're getting sick all the time and just mentally kind of unstable and all these things. Is because they don't have that negative energy, right? So technology is making us more like the Taoist immortal. Well, yeah, that's it, I guess. And to relate it back to the start of the developmental cycles, technically would technology be helping us develop to further things? I think it's facilitating the higher levels, as in the highest kind of levels of development, or more the middle upper levels of development, is once you start like looking at other cultures and countries outside of your own society, and that's what we can do with technology. You would think someone in Africa, it's like now they have the ability to look at a person in like China and their life and watch like Billy videos, which is like Chinese YouTube, or technically Chinese YouTube as well, of videos of like someone in China and making a bridge out of wood or whatever. It's like, oh, look at this fascinating other culture. I can bring that back to my society and my culture. I can make a bridge, except I'll make it out of, whatever local wood we have available. And instead of being a bridge over water, it's a bridge over, I don't know, maybe a little ravine, like a miniature ravine or something. So they're applying it to their own society culture, which is a lower developmental area, but they're using upper developmental stuff to do that, and the technology is keeping them neurologically plastic. See, the immortal is infinitely neurologically plastic because they eventually they become energy, which is everything at the same time, right? It's like everything, it's just a field, while the person who's stuck is, it's not very plastic, not very outgoing, not very, but they have a lot of stuff, they have a lot of skills probably, but they just don't really use them as much besides work and necessity. So, right, the technology keeps us plastic and more stimulated, and instead of falling into like a void of stagnation, which you don't really want to fall into. You can sometimes, to heal yourself and develop yourself, you can do that. It's a bit like if you are a young person, you have a parent or a grandparent, and you saw them get a phone or a computer, and you notice maybe they're a little more childlike, or a little more young, or a little more stimulated, or a little more mentally, like imagine in the past, before computers, there were books, but most people didn't have books, so what did you do? You just kind of like, you fucked your wife, you cooked your food, you tended to your field. I mean, leisurely more so. Some people, they would develop, at least in Europe, like little technologies, little clockwork thingamajiggers. They'd maybe do some arts. You draw some stuff or play music on a little lute or a fiddle or a flute or whatever, right? Which kind of stimulates you, but it's not as stimulating as, say, a book, which is, puts you in the mental world. And a computer is an electronic book. It's just the next level of a book, right? It's got pictures. It's an electronic book with pictures and sounds and all this that replicates the mind and the brain and the sensory experiences. And that is constantly stimulating the brain. So the person in the past, in the rural country land or whatever, in 300 years ago, didn't really have 500, 1,000 years ago, even didn't have a computer. And they were more in body, they were more in the lower stuff, which is why they were more healthy, why they were more sturdy and strong and had more children and were more, able to craft stuff and build all their own tools in their houses and farm their own crops and animals and all this stuff. And they didn't have social autism, and they didn't have autism in general, or probably they didn't have as much mental retardation, ADHD, and all these mental disorders and other disorders, right? Assumably, I don't know, they still had, the idea of being demonically possessed and, being crazy people and all that, but how much of that was like poverty and drugs and, too much alcohol maybe, or eating the weird mushrooms or weird red rocks that seem to be, by the creek or whatever, I don't know. So in general, though, people are a lot more sturdy and strong. And the interesting thing is the future. Where does the future lead? Because I think we get to choose, because there's this idea that the aliens are just humans that basically went too hyper positive. Now I've got I know a buddy from basically when I was a child, and we took two vastly different paths in life, right? And I can see he's got a lot more positive energy, and I've got a lot more negative energy, right? And mind you, I'm this guy I'll always see him as a brother. I always talk to him. He's a great guy, all that kind of stuff. So this ain't no hate or anything, but yeah, we took two different paths. He's more positive, I'm more negative, right? And that's what I think we're going to choose as humans, is in you get to choose your path, and you're going to see it with people who chose a different path, and you're not going to be able to communicate as well to them because they don't really understand your life, and you really don't understand their life, so to speak. And people who are positive, maybe they change to being more negative. People who are negative change to being more positive. So you're not stuck. You can decide, and every day what you do is, you choose that. For example, expend more energy, be more like, do more things if you want to be more positive, relax more, focus more on finances and family and career and stability if you want to be more negative, it's all this kind of stuff, right? Or you focus on both. It's up to you. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I focus on them both to an extent. I have phases of being more creative and phases of being more relaxed. Recently, I've just had to focus more on my career and my stability and finances, all that stuff. I'm looking forward to when I don't have to do that. Once I have the money, set up everything, got it all good, and I can get to work on some, really nice artistic projects. Maybe that could be my career one day. Hopefully, who knows? Point being is that the aliens chose super mental technology and to be super, like intellectual and all this stuff until a point where probably their dicks shrunk back into, not a whole lot of dick, right? Well, they got like internal balls. I don't know. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by what an alien would look down there like. Gotta find me some alien porno or something. Goodness me. Terrible, isn't it? Terrible. But I'm fascinated. So you get the choice, right? And I think that's what the future brings, is that we're going to have more and more stimulating technology, more and more stimulating drugs and virtual drugs and food and movies and games and all these experiences. And it's like, hey, you see people going back to like the traditional life. The ironic thing is you have to be really rich to go back to traditional life. And it's like all these people, you find out that like the husband is an investment banker or some, something like that. When there's like a woman making traditional videos, good on her. I'm no hate, absolutely no hate. You're living a good natural life. But the reality is that's kind of what that's kind of what facilitates a life is a lot of money, which is why, as I said, you got people making a lot of money and then they go back to living in the country because, again, it's kind of hard to go to work when you live, 2 hours away from any city, any town, so it is a bit like that at the end of the day. You probably get the point, though. You get to choose what you want to be, and, I don't know about you, I don't want to be some, like, infertile alien that only eats pancakes, and nothing wrong with pancakes, but apparently that's what they eat. They eat like cakes made out of wheat or whatever, and that kind of stuff. Similarly, I don't want to be like, well, I guess it wouldn't. If you were like some ooga booga caveman, king of the jungle, you wouldn't have the intelligence to feel sad. It's kind of like the idea of if you fundamentally, if you died and there was no afterlife, which I don't really believe in, I do think there's a soul. But if there were no soul and you just died, then you'd be dead and you wouldn't really care about it, right? It's like that idea. But I wouldn't, I'd want to, I like technology, I like mental stuff, right? But I also like physical stuff. Also, I like a bit of everything. So, anyway, you get to pick what you want to be and what your family is, and every decision you make decides that, and everything you do decides that. But ultimately, it's like the energy is like the wave in the background, which is pushing us, and the wind in the background, which is pushing us towards where it wants to go. And you can just kind of feel out where you want to go, and your little boat will just kind of be pushed towards that way. Of course, you can mentally navigate it and be like, well, okay, let's do these things, and and that's like more your sails. You're putting your sails up in a certain direction, and you're turning the wheel to steer, which turns the little rudders underneath the boat to kind of assist and draw the energy and the pressure and all that of the feelings of where you want to go. But what I'm saying is like, it's both. You have to feel and intend energetically and emotionally where you want to go, but you also have to think and act. See, thinking and acting is like the two. Acting is the physical, logical, masculine version of thinking, right? Because you're applying pressure, while physically you're applying pressure to the world. While feeling is like it's a more subtle application of pressure, but it is physical. It is like emotions cause people to do crazy things, right? Or good things. I think emotions are good. Passion and love, and sometimes we need anger, sometimes. And then will is like that non-physical force of direction, which isn't quite as like rigid and constrained as thinking. Thinking is a more logical, so to speak. Anyway, in 30 minutes, I'm gonna end it here. Summarize it. You've got two of these development things. You start off from the root, which is survival, into figuring out community, society, other people, to the whole world, to everything, to your minds, to cosmic everything. Well, the opposite is you are also at the same time going from your mind, which is chaotic, chaos energy, and you're being materialized and filtered down into, you're being put in a mold and heated, and you're becoming this solid little piece of plastic. Like, I looked at this video of people turning plastic into like a comb. It was pretty interesting. Put it in the oven in like this metal mold, and you make a little a comb for your hair. Pretty cool. That's you, right? And you're being made into the comb of whatever your family, culture, society wants. And you have the power to say, no, I want to be a little bit different. I want to do whatever I want to do. Of course, it's good to follow nature. It's good to follow what works. There's a reason why culture and tradition is what we have, because it's what worked, right? Of course, you've got to make your own culture and tradition to an extent. Or you were a poor bastard who was grown into these frontier countries, which is Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and America, and to an extent nowadays UK is kind of like that. England, Ireland, Scotland, etc., who don't have their culture and tradition anymore. They kind of lost it. The parents and grandparents didn't really pass it on, so you have to figure it out again. Who knows? Either way, you get to choose the future. And of course, you can be everything. It just costs you more. You can buy all of the flavors of ice cream. It's just going to cost you 5 times as much. Are you willing to earn 5 times as much dollars to be everything? Or do you just want to focus on a couple things and only pay 3 times as much? Or 2 times? Or do you just want to be a little skinny alien who hallucinates custom-made 3D number like 5 inside their brain? I'm envisioning that right now. If you know that game, you'll know what I'm envisioning. If you don't, good. You don't want to know what I'm envisioning. Or I don't know, playing whatever like RPG, you're playing your Elder Scrolls number 10 inside your brain. There's nothing. You can be like a super strong caveman, Sasquatch, hairy Sasquatch, also playing the Elder Scrolls 12 or the World of Warcraft expansion where you go up to level 200. I don't even know what the fuck level. I think it's like 120 or something. Damn, I stopped playing ages ago. Good fun though. I'll leave it at that. See ya. Of course, check the link in the description and have a good day.